Welcome to the new and improved ConfigureITDone Podcast. The ConfigureITDone Podcast is now a place where we interview senior thought leaders in the SAP space across Australia and New Zealand, and the aim is to tap into their knowledge so we can pass on their insights to the listening SAP community. Please subscribe to the podcast and like, share and comment across Castos, YouTube, Apple Podcasts or Spotify.
This podcast is in partnership with the Black Dog Institute, who aim to create a mentally healthier world for everyone. If you wish to donate to the cause, please click the link below.
Yeah, we've got a good guest today, an IBM director or manager, Wes?
Associate partner.
Oh, partner. There we go. An IBM partner. I remember talking to one of your colleagues.
Not quite partner yet, but associate partner. But look, the title is just a title, really. Yeah.
There we go. So I remember talking to one of your colleagues, Amanda Okenfell, in a previous series, and she had some good stories of when she was in the Navy and ships getting circling with pirates, and how she's taken that experience and runs programs now. And but yeah, hopefully you haven't got many scary stories as that, Wes.
No, not quite like Amanda. I mean, Amanda's had a really colourful career so far. Really great person to chat to, and hell of a good person to know in your network of people.
Excellent. And I've also got my colleague Chay with me today. How are you, Chay?
I'm very well. Yeah, all going well on my side.
Excellent. All right. Well, Wes, we always kick off these podcasts just so the audience can get to know you a bit better. And Chay's going to run you through just a few quickfire questions. So I'll set the timer for a minute. Over to you, Chay.
So the first one was, what is your full name?
It's Wesley Patrick Dunn.
Wesley Patrick Dunn. It's a funny one because my stepdad's surname is Dunn as well. D-U-N-N. Exactly the same.
A lot of people always ask me if I'm related to somebody else that's got the same surname or has got an E at the end. I'm like, no, not really. But anyway, yeah.
Very common. And where are you from, Wes?
Originally from Johannesburg in South Africa.
Yeah. It's always been on my list of destinations. I'd love to go there. And how long have you been in Australia?
Just over 9 years, Chay.
9 years. Wow, what a long time. And
yeah, it feels like it's been like a lifetime, to be honest with you. I had to do a little bit of just reconciling how long I've been here, but because I've traveled quite a lot, but it's probably been one of the longest places that I've stayed put for a while.
And what is your favorite sport?
Look, like you guys, I'm sure. I'm a rugby union guy. I don't mind obviously watching soccer and rugby league. Actually been getting into rugby league quite a lot lately. I still, to this day, can't quite understand and follow AFL, although it's actually pretty exciting to go watch live.
Rugby union, you're talking my language now, Wes, being a Welshman.
Yeah.
I'm looking forward to the World Cup next year, I can assure you that. So I hope we do you Springboks over, in all honesty, but I'm not sure if that's going to happen, you know. And what is your favourite holiday destination?
Look, I love going anywhere where there's a beach. I've got 2 young boys, so I'm just over 16 months now, and eldest one, Harvey, is just under 4. He'll be turning 4 next month. So anywhere where we can go where there's actually a beach, and they just get to run and roam around. Look, I don't mind any real destination, but I've been finding that just over the last couple of years that's pretty therapeutic, right? Because especially you're running off the kids, and best place to run off the kids and not have to worry about them really getting themselves into too much danger is on a beach.
Yeah. I remember they were always my favorite days at the beach, you know. So you're back to your childhood and you remember those days. So yeah, I can relate to that. And if you could describe your management style in one word, Wes, what would that be?
Yeah, I'd say, look, I'm probably consultative. Definitely have evolved my leadership style over the course of my career. Some people actually refer to my leadership style as being a bit of a chameleon, right? So obviously I can mold it and shape it into any any different situation, which yeah, I take that as a compliment.
And the last one from me, Wes, is what is sort of on your bucket list? Do you have anything on your bucket list that you would like to do?
Yeah, look, I'd love to go and explore Greece and Spain. Look, I've traveled quite extensively in the world, but never made my way out to those parts of the world. So they definitely are there. Possibly, my wife Pip and I have been talking about doing some travel. Probably not the right time to travel with a 16-month-old toddler. He'll probably land up causing a little bit of distress with the other passengers on the plane, getting to those different locations. But look, we're looking at planning some trips to those two destinations. Probably maybe next year, right?
I lived in Spain for a year during my university days, and yeah, it was fantastic. Valencia. So yeah, if you ever get a chance, head down there. It's it's a really, really beautiful part of the country. It's Spain is definitely one of my favorites.
Excellent. I'm going to be reaching out to you to get some more some more tips on that. Yeah.
No worries. Yeah, no worries at all.
You speak Spanish as well, Chay, don't you?
I do speak Spanish. Yeah, it is. I'm sort of losing it a bit. I studied Spanish in university, but yeah, to be honest, my partner doesn't speak Spanish, so I don't have any time to speak it. So I'm losing it day by day, which is a bit unfortunate. But I think if I go back, I'll probably get back into the swing of things. Hopefully,
coming along the traveling vibe, Wes. I'd love to understand a bit about your background. I remember a podcast that we've done with Nick Safiris, who worked at Ampol. He's one of the senior leadership team there. And he said he used SAP to travel the world. So I've noticed you mentioned there you've been to a number of places. But yeah, if you can take us through your background and how did you get into SAP and what your story is, that'd be brilliant, Wes.
Sure. Look, I probably find I jumped into SAP or landed in SAP by pure accident. Actually started out as a business analyst, so was back in. Finished studies back in 2000s. Obviously, you had the whole, Y2K issues that a lot of companies were obviously trying to work through back in the early 2000, or in 2000 itself, or leading up to 2000. And then really ventured out into financial services. I started a small startup which was called the IQ Business Group in South Africa. They were an ex-Anderson consulting outfit, so pretty much very similar to how Accenture used to be run as well. And we did a bit of work in the banking space. That took me to a natural progression to actually go take on a lead business analyst role at a bank. Probably one of the worst jobs that I've had, I would say, where I just found that it was you had to wait for your boss to die before you could move up. Look, you just needed to obviously, manage your career in terms of where you wanted to go. But I found a natural affiliation back into consulting, right? So that's really one of the things that attracted me back into consulting. I joined Accenture on the 1st of August 2005. I still remember the day like it was yesterday. And then that just really spawned off my career in SAP. Now, I knew a lot about SAP from previously, because obviously there was a lot of R2, R3 implementations that were still happening in the lead up to my studying, and obviously in my school career and studying, where I knew quite a fair bit about the product, especially working in the mining and manufacturing industries. Mm-hmm. I did quite a bit of work in as part-time as a student in the manufacturing organization, so I had a bit of affiliation with what SAP could do. Yeah. And then I landed up doing a conversion and data migration, or data conversion and cutover role for Absa Bank, which is large banks owned by Barclays right now. In Africa. That was a big ERP implementation that they did, or transformation they did back in 2005. And then that landed me to I would say, finding my feet in the human capital space, which is where I've pretty much been playing most of my career over the last 18 years, I would say, in SAP, where I went to go do an HR implementation for a company called Extrata Coal, which is part of Glencore right now. Where it was a bit of an out-of-time project, but I had a lot of contractors that I needed to manage who were pulling in different directions. And so that leadership style of mine really needed to obviously bring everybody into the fore. But I've really found a passion in HR. And I had known nothing about HR at that stage. I literally only knew about, being an employee and obviously all the types of agreements, etc., that we worked on, and just found that it was a natural fit for myself. And that's taken me onto different paths, different projects. I did a regional deployment delivery role for SAB Miller. That was in South Africa, London, Colombia, and in Europe. And then after I'd finished that was around 2010. I was asked to go do a global cutover role in Singapore for BHP or BHP Billiton at that stage. Now, I knew nothing about Singapore, and obviously was excited to jump on the opportunity. It was something that I thought, at the time was very exciting, and what landed up being a 9-month role actually turned out to be, I was there for just over 3 years, right? So stayed in Singapore from 2011 all the way through to 2013. And that then just, took me from different destinations, obviously doing quite extensive travel in Singapore, Malaysia, back to South Africa, back then to Singapore. And I did a couple of different roles, so from conversion, cutover to deployment, to actually helping some of the customer implementation teams, because that's how the project was actually structured, to coming to Australia and doing a lot of work in helping programs with the SAP payroll and deployment strategies. And then I initially moved to Brisbane because that was just where I felt a natural affiliation, but landed up staying there only for 2 years, moved to Melbourne, did quite a number of SAP and SuccessFactors implementations at Telstra, and then of course Energy Australia, did some work at Orica, which is another mining giant, in the process engineering space, especially for their SuccessFactors implementation. I did a short stint in Singapore to help Orica do their deployment, came back to Australia, did some more work at BHP on their core HR implementation. So a number of years ago, obviously implementing SAP HR back in 2011. And then now we were implementing Employee Central. So that was for a good couple of months as well. And then after that, I was asked to go and lead a program in Abu Dhabi. So did extensive travel between Melbourne and the UAE. I think I must have traveled there about 20 times, right? One of the catches that I actually had, or terms that I should say that I had for the project team, and the client was very actually open to this, was that I would go for 2 weeks and come back. So I'd obviously just work a fortnight and then come back to Australia. So it actually worked out pretty nicely. A lot of first class travel and business class travel as opposed to that. But it was really fun. And then after that, I took a little bit of a turn in my career. I wanted to do something a little bit differently. I landed up leaving Accenture after a 13.5-year career. I joined Deloitte to help them re-establish their SuccessFactors practice. So they went from a team of about 10 people in Australia. There was about 10 people in New Zealand as well. At the time, we grew that to 25 in Australia prior to the acquisition of Presence of IT. And then that then catapulted into another 139 people in Australia and New Zealand. Probably pushed them into what's arguably first or second place globally as a system implementer. COVID hit. Obviously, I was affected by mass redundancies that Deloitte had. And then I picked up a nice role at IBM as a result of all that work that I did at both Accenture and Deloitte, to help them re-establish their business where they essentially in their SAP HR business had about a 13-year hiatus from actually participating in the space. So it's been really exciting and roller coaster career.
I love the varying different countries there. And what would you say the main differences are between each country Wes, and comparing that to Australia, like with the type of people that you work with?
Look, I found that working, as a South African, going and working in countries like Singapore, you had to really tone back, how you interact with folks, right? And so obviously the demeanor of, and look, as South Africans, we pretty much are very direct, right? And so I found I needed to relax a lot of that directness, and obviously working with folks in Singapore and Malaysia. Obviously, there was a lot of multicultural folks all in working on that PhD program at the time, but you really needed to tone down on how you delivered your message, etc. So it really was the start for me around my empathetic journey, because up until that time, I'd argue my leadership style would probably much have been autocratic, and so that it evolved into transformational, and I found that it's evolved even since then, right? I'm say in Australia, back to the directness again, so I've had to really balance that out, right? So I suppose that really comes back to the point that I mentioned before, is around it's I've got this ability now, and several people have told me this in feedback that I've received, is that I've got this ability to switch on and model my leadership style according to the situation. So I've actually found that works pretty well in good stead, depending on the situation.
Can you give us an example, Wes, of that? Just so
Yeah.
listeners, if they're listening, they can learn off someone like you.
Yeah, definitely. Look, I found when I moved from Accenture to Deloitte, I was often referred to by some of the partners as having a few rough edges, right? So for those that are listening, they'll know exactly who they were that mentioned that. But look, that's not necessarily a bad thing, right? Look, Accenture's got very much a certain style of how they teach folks in the different consulting schools that you travel overseas to, and obviously and the methodology, etc., how you plan to work with the plan. But Deloitte was very much a different organization, where it was very much about the people. And so you couldn't necessarily have a particular style of, this is the way I'm going to do things. You had to have a lot of consultation with the team, etc. And it was the team's feedback from that, more that 360 view perspective, that actually you would have a consolidated view. So I found that I needed to adapt my style of how I came into the organization, and really tone down a lot of that directness, right, and really learn the business at the same stage. Because arguably there were two very different businesses and business models that how they run, and I found that just working with a number of different individuals in Australia, that both partners and obviously peers and some of the folks that I worked with directly on different projects, really helped shape how I actually revolutioned working in Deloitte, and actually embraced the organization as such, right? I think it was very much what Mark Cooper, who's another been a strong influencer in my career, is actually what he definitely terms as a defining moment in your career.
That's excellent. I also like that travel aspect, as Jay mentioned. It's the beauty of it, really. All of those countries you mentioned, there's quite a lot there as well, that you sort of SAP has took you, on a journey, and been able to visit and travel all to these amazing places as well, which is excellent. What I suppose, what keeps you in the SAP domain, Wes, and what do you enjoy about it, I suppose?
Yeah, look, Chay, I would say it's a lot of it has got to do with the people, right? There's relationships that are forged, and I'm sure there's many folks like me that have forged over the last 18, 20 years, right? I've been working now for just over 22 years. It's definitely the people, right? And I enjoy the people. There's some folks that I've worked with for, in 4 different roles, and some of them, and obviously the 3 major consultancies that I've worked at. And often found that a lot of it is about yes, the technology is evolving, etc. But it's also one of those industries that really takes you into new spaces and new boundaries, and consistently pushes you outside of your comfort zone, right? I'm very much one of those proponents for being pushed out of my comfort zone. If I feel that I'm being comfortable, I really take a step back and actually see, well, how else do I get out of my comfort zone, and which we all need to recognize as an area for growth for us.
So you thrive from a challenge as well, which is good. And yeah, as a leader, Wes, what do you think are the 3 most important leadership traits?
So one, believe in your team. So you could argue that your leadership style that might evolve from the five share to obviously transformational or democratic. Believing in the teams, handpicking obviously your team that you have working with you on the ground, trusting your team, and giving them the freedom to actually make their own mistakes, right? So, I'm a firm believer, and look, this has happened to me in my career. Especially when I was junior, when you have some managers that hover over you and almost, micromanage, right? That doesn't really help people grow, etc. So I'm very much a firm believer. You need to almost balance between having that hands-on management style versus also being able to let go and allow people to learn their lessons themselves. Because if you don't really learn those lessons, you're not going to really be able to grow in your career.
I know Jay and our MD Simon always referred to the term of it's not a failure if you learn from it, and I absolutely love that one, because it couldn't be any more true, really.
Yeah. One thing I've also found is not being afraid to ask for help, right? I think many of us, I suppose, even myself included, right? I suppose coming from a South African background, we very much go and try something and try. And you'd argue that you'd see it as a as a failure that you've tried something, etc. But I learned very early on in my career that asking for help is actually a sign of maturity. So I always find that with the teams that I lead, and obviously people that I mentor and coach as well, don't be afraid to ask for help, right? It's actually a sign of maturity in how you evolved. We're not going to be specialists in everything, right? So you do need to demonstrate that and recognize that for yourself, right? That's rather go and ask for help from folks that that understand a particular subject matter. Yes, you can learn a lot about it, but you don't have to be a specialist in everything.
That was one of the positives I felt coming out of the pandemic, where a lot more people were open to ask for help, not only work but the mental health side as well. And it's actually, like you said, it is a sign of maturity to ask for help. Focus on post pandemic now. How's your leadership style adapted again?
Jay, I would classify myself as to be very much transformational. I think I've evolved from that autocratic to democratic to now what is arguably transformational. Yes, you've had that laissez-faire leadership style there. You could argue that that's obviously where you're somewhat transformational, somewhat democratic, but you essentially are completely hands-off as a manager. I think that's got pros and cons, right? But very much now a transformational leader, I encourage a lot of camaraderie and consultation with the teams that I work in. I myself like as a manager to get my hands dirty, right? So we're obviously in the trenches with everybody, and not that style where it's very much autocratic, right? And it's like, this is what we're going to do, etc. Yes, there are probably times where you need to, as a leader, make those decisions on behalf of the team and obviously guide that through, because you're in troubled waters. But it's got to be it's very much situational. So definitely think that over the course of my career that I've become more rounded and really polished out all those rough edges.
And Wes, in terms of SAP programs, obviously, as you mentioned there, you've worked on a good amount of SAP programs, as from, I suppose, from the bottom to the top, really, leading those as well. And to you, what does a successful SAP program look like? And how has your view of this evolved or changed over time?
Yeah, that's a great question, Chay. I find that a lot of it is when you in an SAP program, the more you can practice and rehearse something, right? So, for example, we just take kind of rehearsing the go live, right? The more and more you can practice that, and it would actually be when it becomes a non-event, when you actually go live, then you've done your job, right? Essentially that there's no surprises, etc. So identifying risks early, obviously mitigating issues early on, and being open and collaborative and working as a team. It's no good in I've been working on a large transformational program currently at the moment, and there has been instances where teams work in silos, etc., and we've actually had to break down a lot of those boundaries, right? Because the more and more complex programs we work on, right? Sometimes we forget that aspect, especially like in the world that we're working in now. It's an implementation that's run where people are participating in different states, different locations, etc. And so you can't always be in front of each other face to face in person. We do try and locate from time to time, but you've always got to bring that back to the fore. Is how can I and the team be different in terms of creating value for this customer, right? And almost seeing it as if you were actually a shareholder of that particular organization, right? So putting yourself into the shoes of you're a custodian of this particular, receiving this implementation. What would it be like from that perspective?
Wes, you've mentioned a couple of times there around teams working in silos and you having to break down the barriers. How do you do that? Especially, obviously, I noticed you're at home today and working remote. How do you go about that, especially in that remote environment?
Yeah, look, Jay, I find that I do travel quite extensively. So when I am in town, so a couple of weeks time I'm going to be in Perth. So a few of us are actually traveling into Perth for another client. And find that I usually celebrate even the small successes with the team. So trying to pair that with a team building event or going out for drinks or dinner, etc. Teams that know me really well, I love to go out to a nice restaurant, etc., and obviously celebrate the wins, right, however big they are, and really bring the teams together from a camaraderie perspective from that point of view. I think when you break bread with people around your team, they really respect you a lot more, and really it's a way that you can collaborate around how you improve and go forward. Yes, that's not always possible, when you're working virtually. I mean, arguably, I love working virtually. I mean, I've got coffee on tap when I want to. Canberra doesn't have the best coffee, so I must admit that I do have my coffee shipped in from Melbourne. I've got a really nice cafe that I get my coffee from in Melbourne. But it's really nice to. And it's also nice to go and have those coffee breaks with individuals, right? And so I try and do a lot more of that. So I've got a bit of a balance right now where I work some days remotely and some days I'm in the office and client facing, right? So I'm trying to strike the balance between the two.
That's a really good point that you made there, sort of going out for, I suppose, dinner and that sort of thing with the team after a success. And obviously in this market, I think we've had this conversation once before, retention is obviously so important. And I think recognition of your team comes down to that. So the fact that, rewarding the team and going out and celebrating after a success is fantastic. Really like that idea, which is good. We talked around failure and I suppose learning just a moment ago. And what would you describe as your biggest failure, Wes, and how did you learn from that in your career?
Yeah, look, I mean, I think Chay, there's been a few examples where that's happened, but one that comes to mind is, look, I went through a burnout a couple of years ago, right? So it was a particular program where we were running a global deployment, and I think arguably many of us were burning the candle at both ends. Client wasn't listening, some of our leadership wasn't listening, and I think I just needed to hit the reset button, right, in terms of where we were going, etc., and really recognizing that I needed to hand the baton over to some new blood coming into the organization to actually take that forward. But myself, I think I was just traveling too extensively and really voicing my opinion around where the program should be focused on. But look, we were under some pretty tight budget constraints, and then that manifested itself in the team, etc. And look, many of the folks on that particular program wanted to go take a bit of a different direction in their careers, but they actually learned a valuable lesson from the point that, if you are finding that you're being pushed to your limits, you need to know when to claw back from that. I mean, it's been a few years since that's happened, right? And so now I actually know exactly when I can be pushed to my limit and when not. And adversely, I've also found that with the teams that I lead, I know when to push them and when not to push them, right? And so really having that open dialogue with people up front that, look, your people are your biggest asset. You don't want to burn your people out, because at the end of the day, look, organizations are going to really, are going to try and find alternative ways to put new folks into those roles to move it forward, because obviously you don't want to result in cost overruns, etc., and obviously lose revenue. But you need to bring it back to the people aspect. The fact that you've got this biggest asset, you need these people to drive. And most of the people that I've worked with in my career will all relate to this, and when I say that, focusing on them as individuals is key and paramount, right? And so many people that will actually tell that about you is that I would put the people first, right, before I put the program first.
Yeah, so talking around people, I can imagine you've worked with hundreds and hundreds of really good people and leaders and people in your team in the past, but who would you say has been the biggest influence on your career, and what did they teach you?
Yeah, I find a lot of listening to a lot of podcasts, etc., about obviously leadership styles, etc., and as you evolve. I mean, we've been obviously following people like Elon Musk and Steve Jobs. I enjoy a lot of the motivational speeches that Satya Nadella gives from Microsoft. But one of the key people that come to mind for me is who's been a very, very strong proponent in my career and obviously advocate for me, has been Mark Cooper. So he's a senior partner at Focus HQ, and I've worked with him at Defining Leaders. Actually met Mark when I was at BHP a number of years ago, back in 2011. And he's one of those people that has actually been coaching me in the background and helping me shape that that leadership style as well. So he's definitely one of the key people that stand out for me. But I really have been finding with a number of different podcasts that I've been listening to recently. So currently listening to a whole Harvard Business Review idea cast, where they have leading thinkers in business and management dive into topics about driving up sales, how do what kills deals, etc., dealing with management issues, burnout. So that's really what resonated with me. Networking and obviously family businesses. And then also been listening to quite a bit from Dasha Kurtnert, who actually has been doing a podcast around the science of happiness. So actually that dives into topics about, what makes you tick and focusing on empathy. So those are just a few things that have been quite influential.
That's nice. Okay. Well, before we ask you who you'd like to listen to on the podcast, I'd love to gather your knowledge, I guess, and what would you tell your 21-year-old self if you had that chance?
Yeah, I think that's quite an easy one for me. I mean, I took quite a while in my career to settle in, to figure out what it is that I wanted to do. I mean, arguably in the early 2000s, many of the organizations weren't, the consulting firms weren't hiring at scale at that stage, right? And needed to really find your feet. But I'd say don't be scared to travel and go and explore the world early. I sometimes say this to my wife, that I wish I came to Australia about 20 years ago. And take more risks along the way. Look, I've taken some pretty good calculated risks, but don't be afraid to take more risks, right?
Excellent. Okay. And then lastly, Wes, who would you like to see on the podcast?
Look, you've had quite a good array of folks already, from Alex Andronacci, who I know pretty well, to Amanda Oakenfold, as you said, amongst others. I think another good person that's also been an influence on me, both personally and professionally, is Matthew Katakis. So Matt is the global COO for Spinifex IT. I worked with him when I was at BHP back in 2011. But him and I have had a very good relationship over the last number of years, where he's just really been one of those people that have actually very much matured into a role as a COO, where he was arguably a management consultant. So it's really taken on a very dynamic role within a very small company and grown very radically in a very short space of time.
Excellent. Well, I'm sure Chay will be reaching out to him after this podcast.
Yeah, definitely.
Excellent. Now, Wes, thank you very much for today. That was absolutely fantastic to tap into your history and your leadership style and how you've adapted in those different countries. So yeah, thank you very much for coming on. I really appreciate it.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much, Jay and Chay. All right. It's been great to talk to you guys, and look forward to catching up with you guys soon.
Yeah, thanks so much, Wes. Really appreciate that. That was excellent.
Awesome.
There we go. All good.
Please like, share, comment, and subscribe to the Configure It Done podcast.